Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Diptarup Ghosh Dastidar and I'm an assistant professor in the Amity School of Languages, Amity University, Chhattisgarh. And today we are going to talk about the poem The Last Ride Together by Robert Browning. So before this, we have already discussed about Browning as a poet, a background to Browning and his style of writing, that is the dramatic monologue which he pioneered. We talked about two poems by Browning. One is a dramatic monologue called My Last Duchess, and the second one is not really a dramatic monologue but a very dramatic poem in itself called Prospice. Today, we are going to discuss a very famous dramatic monologue once again, and that is The Last Ride Together. Now, if you want to know more about how Browning wrote monologues, what is the style in which Browning's monologues are framed, we already have a video dedicated to that, so you can check it out. And now, moving on to this particular poem, The Last Ride Together. What happens in it and what is Browning's story with this? So, this poem was published in a volume called Men and Women, which is one of the most famous volumes that Browning ever came out with. So, this poem was written, it was published in 1855 in Men and Women. Now, this particular volume of poetry, it had 51 poems in it in all. And all these 51 poems are written, they are spoken by different people. They are spoken by various kinds of persons, and it is the character study of these persons, or maybe through these poems, Browning is telling you a story. You will find a good example of how, using dramatic monologue, which is drama in poetry, Browning is able to tell you good stories. And this poem is an example of that. So, being a dramatic monologue, we have all the elements in this. So, there is one speaker who is a lover, and there is a listener who is traveling along with the lover, and the listener reacts to everything that is being said but does not respond directly, does not speak. So there is only one speaker throughout, and it is a dramatic moment because, as you can see, it is the last ride. Now, whenever we think about the last ride and we think about Browning and the kind of poems that he has, that we have talked about, like My Last Duchess, or let's say Porphyria's Lover, which I'm very much interested to discuss at some point of time, you get a sinister feeling that maybe something is going to happen in this last ride together. But well, in this poem, nothing like that happens. In this poem, it is a very different story. In this poem, it talks about a person who does not commit any kind of murder or any kind of activity that is sinister, but instead, this person, he actually tries to understand the situation and accepts his failures. So, what happens here is there is this one person, and this is the story. This is the story of The Last Ride Together. There is this one person, for some reason, who has come to know, just like Porphyria's lover, that he is not going to get his lover. So let's say that when you get to know that you will not be able to get your lover, you can go two ways. Number one, you can go and do something wrong, which happens in Porphyria's lover, or you can do something right. You can go on that one last ride, and maybe you can talk it out and accept the accept the part that you will not be able to see her again. And that is what happens in this. So he goes on a long ride. He is not sure whether she would allow him, and then when she allows, they go on a long ride, and he mostly talks about love, he mostly talks about life, and how the best thing in life is to love the present moment. So that is the story of The Last Ride Together. They go on a ride, and it's all the thoughts that are going on in the mind of this one speaker. So why is this poem interesting? What is really interesting in this poem is the structure in which the poem has been written, and along with the structure, the language in which the poem operates, right? So let us understand this. This poem has 10 stanzas, and each stanza stands for a particular idea or a particular thought that comes in the mind of the speaker. So among the 10 stanzas, every stanza has the same pattern, in which the lines are distributed. So let us understand this line pattern in this. There are 11 lines. As you can see, this first stanza of the poem, the first stanza, you can see everything that comes later would be very similar to this. And there are 11 lines in the first stanza. And in these 11 lines, you can clearly see that there is a rhyming pattern. Let us understand the rhyming pattern. So, the last words of every line, or the last sounds of every line, they go like so, no, avails, fails, be, bless, ness, claim, same, blame, me. So the pattern that we get is A, B, B, C, D, D, E, 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 C, where A is so, B is ails, so the ending sound ails, C is B, D is S, the ending sound S, E is aim, the sound aim, and then again C, which is me. So be, me. So you see the fifth and the last line, they rhyme with each other, but they are placed far apart. So this structure, it follows all along. So there is a kind of, towards the end, towards the beginning, there is a regularity. Towards the end, you will find a kind of irregularity in the lines. And in the same lines, you can, if you read it out loud, it sounds as if there is a kind of urgency. And this urgency, towards the end, you get a different kind of rhythm in itself. So I'm just reading this first part. Let's see how it goes. I said then, dearest, since 'tis so, since now at length my fate I know, since nothing all my love avails, since all my life seemed meant for fails, since this was written and needs must be, my whole heart rises up to bless your name in pride and thankfulness. Take back the hope you gave. I claim only a memory of the same. And this beside, if you will not blame, your leave for one more last ride with me. So there is an amount of build up, and that build up leads to a particular resolution that happens towards the end. Now, what is the structure? What is the verse structure in which this poem has been written? So to understand the verse structure, we'll only take the first 4 lines of the poem, of the stanza, and the last 2 lines of the stanza, and we'll try to understand how it goes. So taking the first 4 lines, how does it sound? I said then, dearest, since 'tis so. So I said then, dearest, since 'tis so, since now at length my fate I know. Now you would realize one thing: the since over here is accented. The since in here is not accented, because see, in prosody, in the art of scansion, there will always be this gap, this divide between the grammar of prosody and rhythm itself. And whenever there is this clash between grammar and rhythm, you forget the grammar, you go with the rhythm. If the rhythm is suiting a different kind of accent, then you go with it. For example, words like off and in, these are always unaccented. There is never an accent when you say and, in, off, to prepositions. But sometimes you might have to give accent. So for instance, one of the famous poems by Blake, Tiger, the first line is, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. So you see, in of are stressed because the rhyme demands it. And that is why here, one since, dearest, since tis so, demands the accent, whereas since now, here since does not demand an accent. Since now at length my fate I know, since nothing all my love avails, since all my life seemed meant for fails. So you see, when you get this kind of a apostrophe something D, so it's clubbing or cutting short a word. So when a word is cut short like this, it clearly means that it is meant to be pronounced in a different way. It is meant to be not be stressed as such. So you can see there is a pattern over here. Iambic, 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 clear iambic. And in finding these iambics, how many are we getting? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can see that this poem is in iambic tetrameter, 4 meters, each having iambic, perfect iambic. However, like I said, that we'll not just be discussing the first 4 lines to understand this, but also the last 2 lines, because the last 2 lines, the rhyme itself gets interesting, as well as the rhythm or the verse structure. So let's get to the last 2 lines. So the last 2 lines go like, and this beside, if you will not blame your leave for one more last ride with me. So, and this beside, if you will not blame. So you have 4 accents, and therefore it will be divided into 4 parts. But the third one is not iambic. The third one is anapaestic. And we have also discussed how anapaestic and iambic, they go together very easily. Your leave for one more last ride with me. Again, here you have another anapaestic. So you see that in this poem we not only have the iambs, but we also have the anapaestic meter. So the unstressed, unstressed, stress, for one more, that is how it is pronounced. So the word structure we have understood is iambic, iambic tetrameter, and sometimes you will find anapaestic meter as a variation, or anapaestic foot as a variation. And in this entire poem, as you have seen so far in the lines that we have come across, and we'll see this even more, you have enjambment. You have loads and loads and loads of enjambment in this poem. And enjambment, as you know, is run-on lines. So the meaning gets transferred onto the next line. Even though the line ends, the meaning doesn't end, it goes on to the next line instead. So now, we have talked about the verse structure, we have talked about what the poem is about. I've told you that there are 10 stanzas in this poem, and we know that what kind of poem this is. So finally, we are going to discuss, in short, what happens in the 10 stanzas, so that in the next class, we can start reading the poem itself. So, what happens in the last ride together, stanza by stanza? As you can see here, in the first stanza, there is a speaker, and the speaker requests the lover for one last ride. Please come with me. In the second stanza, there is an anticipation, as if life and death depends on the answer that will be given by this lady. And she says, yes, let's go. So they start going on a ride in the second stanza itself. In the third stanza, there is a euphoria. There is a kind of happiness, a bliss, and as if all the nature is one. And you get a sense of pathetic fallacy in a way here, but it is not as good as we have seen in the earlier poems. But there is an element of pathetic fallacy in this particular stanza, and there is a euphoria as the romantic energy builds up. In the fourth stanza, he says that now while they're going on, he's thinking about how love should be and how love is best perceived. So he says that there is no point in thinking about what could have been. Instead, we can enjoy the present moment. In the fifth stanza, after having said that we should enjoy the present moment, and he enjoys this moment with his lover. He accepts that he is an utter failure and that his love is not going to win in the end. But in this acceptance, there is a kind of humility. In the sixth stanza, it talks about how love, the experience of love, it far outweighs the rewards of war and work. So no one gets what they want ultimately, and this goes on in the next stanzas as well, which starts in 6. It goes on till the 7th and 8th stanzas, and in the 7th stanza you get the idea that he asks the poets that whether they know what is good in life, and they say that it is best to live love instead of doing anything else. So in the 8th stanza, you get the idea that sculptors and musicians, so the poet makes a distinction between sculptors and poets and between musicians and poets, and says how sculptors and musicians are also reaching out for the same things that he is reaching out as a lover, but he is as much of a failure as they are in their work, because ultimately they do not get what they strive for. They die before that. Something to this effect. In the 9th stanza, he says that you should aim high in love, and then you should always accept your failure, and he himself accepts his failure. And in the final stanza, he talks about how to live and love in the moment, how to live in the moment and how to love in the moment. That, for you, my friends, is the last ride together, in short. In the next session, we'll start talking about the poem itself. We'll come to know about the intricacies, about the language of the poem. We'll come to know about how he uses some metaphors in the poems and uses analogies in the poems, in the poem itself. That concludes this particular video session. I hope that you learned something new from this, and I hope to see you guys again in the next video.